This is a video with post-fight observations of Saturday's Chris Eubank Jr. versus Omar Siala. It wasn't the originally named opponent on BoxRec, this one. Another German contender, this guy. He came to the ring 23 wins, 10 by KO, 17 losses, 11 by KO, 3 draws. 25-year-old experienced opponents, 44 fights. In terms of the fight itself, it was a brief encounter. Fight got stopped midway through the second round. Eubank Jr., as you'd expect, totally dominant. Doing all of his play acting, dancing around the ring, fighting at weird angles, posing at the start of the fight. Classic sort of Eubank Jr. performance. What I really wanted to comment on is a few of my non-boxing friends who are sort of boxing fans who would only know Anthony Joshua, David Haye, those kind of fans, are really getting on the Chris Eubank Jr. bandwagon. I know he did this video in his gym where he was punching a bag on the wall, and he looked like a big hitter, and he's obviously the kind of character with his family name and with his personality and the way he carries on who can be a crossover star, which is a good thing for the sport. But a few of my sort of non-boxing friends that think this guy is the second coming. The way he hits so hard, he makes opponents look so silly. What I want to do is just talk about a few of the facts of this fight. So Chris Eubank Jr., he made weight, I believe, at 160. It was his first time actually fighting at the middleweight limit of 160. But he's a man who has, come down in weight, cut weight to hit that 160 limit. He may have looked spectacular on Saturday night, but visually when I was watching the fight, I remember thinking his opponent looked, so much smaller than him. So I looked it up. The guy's largely fought at light middleweight, and I then noticed that he's actually scheduled to fight in February of 2015 for the German welterweight title. So this is a guy who will, if my understanding is correct, be fighting at 147 pounds, whereas Eubank Jr. is a guy who has cut weight to make 160. Now, I appreciate this was a warm-up fight. I'm not expecting Eubank Jr. to be in with, a world beater. But to the casual fan out there, it's important you know this information, because yes, Eubank Jr. looks spectacular, but so would Sergei Kovalev if he was in against Matthew Macklin. There's 2 weight differences between them. And I think that's something that needs to be known. Again, Eubank did well, he got a stoppage, but this is a guy who has shown himself at times not to be the most durable. If you look at his recent fights, he got stopped in the first round, got stopped in the third round, got stopped in the third round again, and these are against, lighter, smaller opponents than Chris Eubank Jr. So I'm not saying it wasn't a good performance. You can only beat what's put in front of you. But the casual fan out there who's going to put their house on Eubank Jr. beating Saunders needs to understand that whilst he was visually very impressive, he was fighting an opponent who was much smaller than him, who fights in lower weight divisions, who's already proved to be not durable at those lower weight divisions. He's been stopped 12 times now at sort of light middleweight, etc. So yeah, I don't think we should get carried away. Funnily enough, and I don't mean to be overly critical of Eubank here, but he hit his opponent with a picture-perfect uppercut in the second round. It's an absolutely spectacular shot. Superb uppercut, and it's brilliant that he's able to throw and land a punch like that. But what surprised me is we've got an opponent who isn't durable. We've got an opponent who's, as I say, a smaller man, fights in lighter weight divisions, and the guys seem to be able to take the shot. I mean, the referee called the fight off pretty much instantaneously after that. I think Eubank swarmed him for 2 or 3 seconds and the fight got called off after that. But the guy was on his feet. There were calls from the crowd and from the commentators that it was a premature stoppage, and I was a bit surprised that a shot like that from an unbeaten middleweight like Eubank Jr. isn't dropping someone who's going to be fighting at welterweight with a 50-50 record. So I'm not totally convinced about Eubank Jr. as an elite level puncher. Of course, he hits hard for the level he's been fighting at, but that's very low, and I am not convinced that when he fights at European level, which Billy Joe Saunders certainly represents, that his punching power is going to look as spectacular as it's done against the queues of journeymen he's been fighting in his first 17 fights. On a side note, all of the movement he does, and all of the sort of sweeping around the ring and fighting at strange angles, that's it's funny, it's comedic, but I hope for his sake he doesn't do that against Billy Joe Saunders. He's going to need to, at this level, he seems to be clowning around in the ring, relying on power shots. Someone like Billy Joe Saunders, love him or hate him, has very advanced movement, has advanced hand speed, advanced foot speed, capable defence. You're not just going to be able to walk in and throw a sort of hook or an uppercut like he's been doing against these opponents. You're going to need to show advanced movement. You're going to have to throw a jab. That jab's going to have to be quick. It's going to have to be snappy. You're going to have to cut down the ring. That is a different ball game when you're up against someone with the amateur pedigree and professional experience of Billy Joe Saunders. Now, I understand that Billy Joe has not come across well in a number of the interviews available on YouTube. I understand that he's disliked by the public, and I understand that Eubank Jr. is becoming a fan favourite. So I don't want to sort of rain on his parade, and I should make clear, whilst I respect Billy Joe Saunders very much as a boxer, I'm not a fan of his antics as much as the next man. But from my perspective, I am yet to see any form from Chris Eubank Jr. that makes me think he is capable of beating a fighter of Billy Joe Saunders' class, pedigree and experience. He hasn't... I've used this analogy before, but if you look at football, if a team runs through the Championship, the second division in English football, wins every single game by a wide margin, looks totally dominant, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a top team or even a top half team in the Premiership next year. And that's what Chris Eubank Jr. has done. He's looked totally dominant, his attributes have looked a class above, but Billy Joe Saunders really is a top level talent in my opinion. The one attribute Saunders doesn't bring to the table is devastating punching power. But as I say, I'm yet to be convinced Eubank Jr. brings devastating punching power at an elite level. And Saunders has so far shown me more advanced hand speed, more advanced footwork, possibly a more advanced defence. He's certainly shown that he can go deep into fights, fight those championship rounds. And Eubank Jr. hasn't had that experience. He hasn't had an interim opponent, someone like a John Ryder, a Nick Blackwell, a British level opponent, to prepare him for this test. In my view, it's too much too soon, and the casual fans who are having him trending all over Twitter and on Facebook, and as I say, I've got a lot of friends who fall into this boat, posting that video that he put up of him in the gym. It's very easy to hit a stationary bag on the wall and for it to make an amazing sound. It's very easy to smash up a journeyman who campaigns 2 weight divisions below you and who's lost 17, 18 times. But when you've got someone like Billy Joe Saunders in front of you, your preparation is key. And by that, I don't mean preparation in sparring, I don't mean preparation against journeymen, I mean preparation against world-class fighters, the likes of John Ryder, the likes of Blackwell, the likes of Landon Murrah. Sorry, I said world class fighters. I didn't. That was a mistake. I mean, let's say, European or British level fighters. Billy Joe Saunders has that. At this point, Chris Eubank Jr. does not. In my eyes, it's too much too soon. Always keen to hear people's thoughts on this one.